Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930, and to celebrate the release of the new Norse-themed God of War, we're going to be taking a look back at the history of God of War. God of War 2 released in March of 2007 at the very back end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle, and was a direct follow-up to the story and gameplay from the original 2005 classic. It features most of the same elements that made the original game such a critical success, including a focus on a cinematic experience, fun but challenging hack-and-slash gameplay, fixed camera angles, quick-time events, and massive battles with mythological creatures. In God of War 2, the player once again takes the role of Kratos, directly after the events of the first game, and is driven by rage to wage war with a Spartan army. After identifying Kratos as a potential threat, Zeus intervenes and tricks Kratos into sacrificing all of his power into the Blade of Olympus, and then uses that blade to stab and kill Kratos. But being as this is a God of War game and Kratos is just that pissed off, he once again finds a way to escape the underworld and sets off on a journey to find the Sisters of Fate, to go back in time to the point where Zeus betrayed him. The story takes Kratos from the City of Rose to the Temple of Lachesis, where a majority of the gameplay takes place, and there's a couple of interesting cameos from other popular mythological characters like Perseus, Euryale, and even Icarus. After killing the Sisters of Fate, Kratos uses the threads of destiny to travel back in time to the moment where Zeus betrayed him, and they have a showdown on top of the Summit of Sacrifice. But after mistakenly killing Athena, one of Kratos' last allies on Mount Olympus, Kratos decides to go even further back in time to the Great War of the Titans, and encourages the Titans to help him with an assault on Mount Olympus in the future. It's an interesting twist on a well-established mythology, and it's a fun, albeit incredibly over-the-top storyline, that ends up letting the player go with a massive cliffhanger. God of War 2's gameplay remains mostly the same as the first game, with near-identical controls and gameplay design, and some minor additions like new combat moves, new powerful abilities, and a bit more variety in weapons. The combat segments are significantly more difficult this time around, with larger varieties of enemies thrown at the player that requires expert knowledge of their strengths and weaknesses, and many of the arenas are combined with difficult obstacles now. Any mistake in your combat can result in an instant death, making this game one of the more difficult entries in the series. New to God of War 2 is the ability to stop time, which is used in a few of the game's platforming segments. You can also glide using Icarus' wings, something that the developers originally intended to be a feature in the first game. Graphically, God of War 2 made some marginal improvements, with a larger scale, improved reflective surfaces, better water simulation, and a more vibrant color palette. But the PS2's hardware had been pushed to its limits at this point, and despite targeting a 60 FPS frame rate again, the game would struggle to maintain solid performance, and there was an obvious need to move on to more advanced technology for the next entry in the saga. God of War 2 also received high scores from critics and fans alike, making it one of the best titles the PlayStation 2 had to offer, and somewhat of a swan song for the platform as the industry moved on to the new generation of consoles. Its unique cinematic story, solid gameplay mechanics, and improvements over some of the minor gripes from the original game had made it one of the most popular entries in the series. Only a few short months after God of War 2 released, a mobile game called God of War Betrayal released, and is the only game in the franchise designed as a 2D side-scrolling game. This mobile game featured its own unique story that had Kratos sacking cities across Greece as the gods tried to intervene. Despite it being a mobile game, the game's signature quick-time event finishers and combo-based gameplay all remained intact to some degree, as well as the franchise's over-the-top gore. This mobile game received decent reviews, but was met with a few criticisms for not being as fun as the main entries to the series, which is understandable considering mobile gaming hadn't really taken off yet. And while Santa Monica was hard at work at the sequel to their main saga, Sony hired another studio, Ready at Dawn, to work on an exclusive PlayStation Portable God of War experience titled Chains of Olympus. Chains of Olympus was a prequel to the God of War series, and has Kratos serving the Olympian gods in hopes that they'll free him from his nightmares. While it doesn't necessarily push the plot forward at all in the main scheme of things, it still has some interesting stories to tell. After battling classic characters like Charon, the ferryman on the river Styx, and Persephone, queen of the underworld, Kratos finds himself sacrificing a chance to be with his deceased daughter to save the world from collapse. Atlas, still bitter after the events of the Great War, attempts to destroy the Pillar of the World, which would effectively destroy Mount Olympus and the gods. However, Kratos intervenes and forces the Titan to hold the world up for eternity, which is a fun backstory and gives more insight into Kratos and Atlas's interaction in God of War 2. The gameplay remains the same as the core God of War experience, but with two unique weapons, the Sun Shield and the Gauntlets of Zeus, which are insanely powerful weapons that make the endgame a bit too easy. New powers are also introduced, as well as the ability to upgrade all of these things, and many of the same standard enemy types make appearances. This PSP game received very high reviews, in line with the other main entries to the series, but some criticized that the game was shorter and had fewer boss fights than standard entries. Chains of Olympus would be the last time we heard from Kratos for a few years, as development for the next main entry for the Sony PlayStation 3 continued.